Okay, thank you so much for witnessing our flower offering for the 64th anniversary of the retaking of Corregidor Island by the American forces 64 years ago. And we are so fortunate today that we have a son of a veteran of Corregidor, Steve Kwiecinski, who will speak to you for 5 minutes on his father's experience here on Corregidor and his what he's doing right now here in Corregidor.
5 minutes, okay.
5 minutes.
Thank you. This is totally by surprise here, so he did this on purpose. I know.
Impromptu.
My father came here in 1941, April of 1941, and served on Corregidor until December 1st. He thought this island was a paradise here, and for those that I've met many soldiers who were here, and Corregidor was the place to be if you were assigned to the Army. This was just a fantastic place to be. On December 1st, his company was sent over to Bataan. So for 1 week, they had peace over there, and then of course the war broke out on December 8th, Philippine time. And for the next 4 months, his unit was on Bataan, and they actually survived the Bataan death march by not being on it. About 2,300 men either swam or took boats from Bataan back to Corregidor on April 9th before the death march started. My father was one of those fortunate ones that didn't have to do the death march. He came back here April 9th. That's when the Japanese moved in and really started to pound the island. For the next 27 days, this was the most bombed area in the world. Corregidor, if you don't know that, is the second most bombed island in the world next to Malta, but Malta was bombed for 2.5 years. So everywhere you go here, you'll find evidence of the bombing. On May 6th, he was the last sergeant at Battery Way. Battery Way was the only big gun that was opposing the Japanese when they actually made their landing. There was also a mortar over on the next island over, Fort Hughes. But those were the only guns that were opposing the Japanese. But they did a good job, and they took out most of the landing barges to the point where General Homa actually thought that they had failed. But they got three tanks on the island, and at that point, General Wainwright said it's just too much. The men were sick, they had no food or water left. And so he surrendered and probably saved several thousand lives because the Japanese had another invasion plan for James Ravine that same night. So May 6th is when, Corregidor surrendered. On May 23rd, the vast majority of the soldiers were sent out of here. My father was one of those that was sent to Cabanatuan prison. He was there for 16 months. Then he spent 2 months on a ship to Japan, what they call the hell ships. His was there for 2 months. And then he finally ended up working in coal mines and so on. Now, at near the end of the war, of course, MacArthur decided the Philippines was important to retake, and so he came back here. He invaded Leyte on October 20, 1944, and on the morning of February 16, 1945, at about 8:13 in the morning, 2,000 parachuters landed in this area here and in the golf course, which is over that way, and took the Japanese entirely by surprise. If you go around the island, you'll see about 400 tunnels that the Japanese dug into the sides, where they loaded them up with either suicide boats or machine guns. They were waiting for the Americans to attack the island the same way that the Japanese had 3 years earlier. We fooled them. We landed by parachute. 2 weeks later, on March 2nd, MacArthur came here, raised the flag at the flagpole. We're going to be doing that just after I am done. So Corregidor was retaken. To make a long story short then, my father was in Japan. He was in Kokura at the end. That was where the second bomb was supposed to be dropped. But because the United States had done so much intensive bombing of other cities, they could not see Kokura because another city was on fire. So they flew on to Nagasaki, and that was when the second bomb was dropped. About 10 days later, somewhere around August 15th, the Japanese informed the POWs the war was over, and he managed to come home and lead a real normal life after that. Fortunately for him, he came back in April of 1980 and saw that that Corregidor had been returned to a paradise. When he was here, it was a paradise that turned into a living hell. He came back, he saw it, and it really changed his life. He began to talk about the war. His nightmares stopped, and for any of you who are interested and want to see a picture of him, if you walk into the museum, take the first left and turn right, make 180 degrees, there's a picture of him standing by his mortar there at Battery Way. You'll see a couple of pictures of him that Art honored me by putting those pictures in there. So that's a little bit of his story and the story of the retaking. And are we going to do the flag raising immediately?
Well,
thank you.
thank you, Steve. Fortunately, we have also the representative of General MacArthur here. He sent Mr. Jim Zobel of the MacArthur Memorial Museum in Norfolk. Sir. Yes, please come over. And he brought with him a 48. Could you please tell them what you brought?
Day. I'm the curator at the tomb of General MacArthur, and on behalf of the General MacArthur Foundation and the MacArthur Memorial, we'd like to raise this 48-star flag today on the anniversary of MacArthur's return and show the shared purpose that the Corregidor Museum and the Foundation and the MacArthur Memorial has in ensuring that the legacy of the veterans of both the Philippines and Americans is carried on into the future.
Okay, so we will walk to the Spanish flag pole where General MacArthur raised the flag 64 years ago.